Welcome everybody to our webinar, Decentralized Clinical Trials, the patient-centric future of oncology R&D. I'm Cyril Laurent, Chief Operating Officer at Median Technologies for our US-based activities based out of Boston, and I will be animating today's discussion. Our panel today is composed of three experts. The first one, Clare Campbell Cooper, is a Senior Director, Enterprise DCT and Patient-Centric Solution at Labcorp, and has been in the pharmaceutical industry for 25 years. Clare's career encompassed data management and project management at Covance. Clare has held management positions in Labcorp operational strategy and planning and oncology global project delivery groups. In September 2021, Clare moved to the digital operation division at Labcorp to focus on digital health solutions. Our second panelist today is Begoña de las Heras. She is a board-certified medical oncologist from the University Autónoma de Madrid, Spain, and Senior Medical Director of Oncology at Labcorp. She is involved in early-phase oncology and decentralized clinical trials, leveraging 23 years of global oncology experience, bringing INDs to NDA submissions. She authors or co-authors numerous book chapters and peer-reviewed articles and presentation, and holds 2 clinical trials-related patents. Finally, our third subject matter expert today is Amani Chassanieu. She is a clinical project manager at Median Technologies and has been in the pharmaceutical industry since 2015. Amani's career started in project coordination in biotech startups before progressing to project management at Median, Sophia Antipolis. And Amani has been managing studies from phase 1 to phase 3 oncology clinical trials for the past 5 years at Median. So now, introducing quickly Labcorp. So Labcorp is a leading global life science company that provides vital information to help doctors, hospitals, pharmaceutical companies, researchers, and patients make clear and confident decisions. Through the unparalleled diagnostic and drug development capabilities, Labcorp provides insights and accelerate innovations to improve health and improve lives. Also presenting today, we have Median Technologies. Median Technologies is a leading AI-based next-generation precision medicine company. We focus on helping conquer cancer and other diseases through routine imaging testing and imaging services for drug development. With our office based in the US, Europe, and China, we operate globally to deliver best-in-class end-to-end imaging services for your oncology trials. So now we will have a quick poll to see if everybody is awoken. So have you worked in DCT? So to our point of our webinar today, please select one. I've worked with DCT in some studies. I've worked with DCT in most studies. I work with decentralized clinical in all studies, or I haven't worked yet with DCT. I'm gonna leave a little bit of time for people to answer. And we are going to get the results here. So we see that most of you guys have not been working with decentralized clinical trials yet, and we have a significant portion as well who have been having some experience with decentralized clinical trials. So there is a lot to be said, and I think that it's going to be very, very interesting moving forward. So without further ado, I will pass the microphone to Claire. Claire, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cyril. Thank you. Traditionally, decentralized trials have meant taking the patient off-site and implementing technologies which facilitate that activity, like e-consent, home health, televisits, wearables, and sensors. This translates in study design to be fully on-site, the site-centric model, hybrid, with some visits being on-site and some off-site, or fully virtual, with all visits being off-site and with data being collected in the real world. Pre-pandemic, more studies were using the site-centric model, And then the pandemic accelerated the changes that we've seen, with many studies being forced into a decentralized space and technology usage being compulsory because patients simply couldn't get on site. So, with necessity, the regulations around the use of DCT changed during COVID, and consequently, there were new guidances issued. Now, post-pandemic, the guidance is being updated. And post-pandemic, the industry is increasingly considering the needs of both patients and sites, and are designing studies that strategically engage DCT or digital health elements, with most studies now being conducted in a hybrid model. And what is the correct strategy to be deployed to relieve both site and patient burden, protect the endpoints, and maximise the opportunity to gather real-world data and create real-world evidence? Well, I believe that the EMA HMA EC recommendation paper on decentralised elements in clinical trials, which was released in December, is right, that investigators and healthcare professionals should be involved in the design, development and implementation of the clinical trial when developing with decentralised elements. And with the focus and considerations on patients and sites, the industry is correctly revisiting the term DCT. A lot of technologies and processes that are seen as DCT are actually agnostic to the location that they're deployed in. For example, a patient can wear a sensor continuously and wear it to an on-site visit, but sensors are considered to be DCT. A patient can complete an e-signature on an e-consent at an on-site visit, but e-consent is technically considered to be DCT. So when we look at all of the approaches that are listed on the slide, decentralized elements can and are used in all of them. And whether the study is fully on-site, hybrid, or remote, we need to actively engage the sites in our study design. And when you look at the title of this slide, you may think that DCT is about how to make it easy for the subjects to be on study, but we also want to talk about how we can help sites. Most studies now have between 3 and 5 different technologies, and in the 2022 SCRS Site Landscape Survey, sites stated that studies with DCT elements added a training burden of between 10 and 20 hours per month. So how do we tackle a patient-centric approach whilst relieving study burden? We do that by adding processes and technology that are appropriate for the study. Some processes, like e-consent and e-COA, can obviously be performed on-site, and those on the right of the slide, like remote sampling, patient service centres, and direct-to-patient shipment, are obviously off-site. And as developers, we need to look at what's best for the process and technology without overburdening either the sites or the patients. By working with partners that can utilise single sign-on, streamline training requirements, relieve burden on overstretched facilities, and use a single platform with dashboards and concatenated reporting for data review, we can achieve this. And we're also changing how we work with patients. Whereas perhaps we're focusing on making all patients follow the same process at the same visits previously, now the goal is to create a flexible process that allows for patient preference. So all our process and technologies are on a spectrum that moves throughout the course of the study. And our ideal is that our strategy is designed for each patient to ensure that they're motivated to enrol and are retained throughout the study duration. And this in itself creates a challenge, because the more bespoke the patient journey is, the more burdensome it can be for the site. So when we are designing a development programme, we always need to remain alert to the ease of study execution. So we're now going to ask you about your experience with decentralised elements, and are going to launch a poll. And the question is, from the main DCT solutions, for those that do have experience, which one do you consider has better acceptance for PIs and patients? And you can choose more than one here. So the answers are eCOA, eConsent, direct-to-patient shipment, telemedicine, and patient-centered images. I'll just give you a little bit of time to answer that. Okay, and if we have a look at the responses, okay, that's interesting. So eCOA and eConsent are both 50%. Direct-to-patient shipment, which was obviously came into its own during COVID, and also telemedicine are all quite high. It's interesting to see that telemedicine high, and I think that's how we see that as well. So if we just go back to the slides, at Labcorp, we actually see the most utilised DCT offerings being eCOA, and then eConsent, and then home health. So home health or telemedicine telemedicine's actually the one that is coming out with the most experience with the poll people, and I think that is obviously something that has really taken off during the COVID pandemic, with many of the institutions actually having their own platform to perform telehealth visits on. And with the different uses for DCT, the choice of the platform is actually critical, because each platform has its own merits. The snapClinical platform is the Labcorp platform, and it contains the traditional DCT elements. So, for example, it has eConsent, televisits, eSource, eCOA, and wearable and sensor integration. As you can see, oncology is our strongest therapeutic area, with phase 3 studies utilising the platform the most. Labcorp makes a vendor agnostic approach, so we always apply the correct strategy to the study, and therefore we partner with other providers. The information on this slide is broadly replicated across the entire Labcorp experience, with oncology being the strongest therapeutic area, but we actually see more phase 2 studies accounting for 43% of our overall experience, and phase 3, 37%. And as I said previously, within Labcorp, we see eCOA and eConsent being our primary use of DCT elements. And what does this mean overall? If we move away from calling it DCT and call it digital strategy, or even just strategy, as that is what it is, we can then distill down to 4 simple principles: enablement, engagement, recruitment, and retention, which in all honesty is no different than what the industry has been striving for over the past decades. But the change is the way we're doing that. We can use the digital ecosystem to identify where patient populations are to accurately reflect a more diverse patient population. We can then take that a step further to use remote training on different platforms to help new sites with access to those diverse population, which in turn facilitates recruitment. Participation is enabled by the removal of geographic boundaries, as travel can be minimised, and cultural preference to visits can help design the protocol schedule of events. Changing communication techniques in line with societal expectation can really help increase motivation and retention. And importantly, we gather more real-world data, both objective and subjective, that we can analyse to create real-world evidence. And this can give us early indications of trial success and data that are meaningful for patients. By incorporating these processes, the resulting data is high and produced from robust data capture systems, whilst minimising the risks that are more prevalent in the post-pandemic environment. And having meaningful data, where we understand what is important to the patient, is, at the end of the day, what we're all aiming for. We're looking to provide a better quality of life to both patients and caregivers by understanding what is important to them and writing that into our protocol as patient-driven endpoints. By listening to the patients and the sites, by using technology to remove geographical barriers and protect the endpoints, by working with the right partner to facilitate the right data collection and increase our data quality, our strategies will continue to evolve. And that's it. That's what DCT is all about. It's still early days, and true adoption, as we all know, does not happen overnight. But we are making the right moves forward. And as one of our patients reported back to our patient engagement team, with your availability and your work, I'm hopeful that I can have a better quality of life. And now I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Begoña. Thank you, Begoña.
What I'm going to provide you in the next slides is a view what has been the perspectives of patients and oncologists based on a survey that we submit during 2020 and 2021 in order to gather information about what is the opinion of implement these solutions in clinical trials. And this will really complement your response that has provided to the poll questions. But as you can see here in this first slide, it's important to stress and to point it out that still the clinical trial participation is low. And as you can see in US and in UK, two of the countries with highest invest in research, the clinical participation is in US around 5% and in UK around 40%. And there are different factors that contribute to that, from socioeconomic factors, demographics. One of the hardest for the patients is the proximity to the clinical site investigation, the lack of available clinical trial for some disease, or even some factors related with the clinical trial as not meeting the eligibility criteria, or other related factors as the patient is taking some concomitant medication. But even sometimes it's the attitude of the patients to participate in the clinical trial, of the physicians to refer the patient to a clinical trial. So there is no doubt that we need to implement some solutions, and that DCT can be something that will help to increase this clinical trial participation, so reduce the burden of the patient to be enrolled and accept to participate in the clinical trial, and to increase retention, that reduce the dropout rate in the clinical trial, and obviously to continue to offer to the patients a quality of life. And you, in the poll question, you mentioned that, or you respond that telemedicine is the one that you have more experience. And obviously, this is something that we are all have been involved in telemedicine consultation, but even is one of the elements that is the first one implemented, because it was used in 1917 in US to follow the astronauts, the health of the astronauts when they were in a mission in Spain. So it's not something that is new, and it's something that we have more experience of that. But also during the pandemic, as Claire has mentioned, there was a high increase of implemented these solutions for the pharma, the cereal, the manufacturers, and there are some surveys that indicate that it was in around the 75–76%, and this was also complemented by the support of the body regulators, the EMA, the FDA, the NICE, and others that are set to implement these solutions to overcome the difficulties that we were facing with COVID-19 and the possibility to the patients to attend to the hospitals. But also it was important to mention that the opinion of the principal investigator, and I have here quote one that she said, "I suspect we went back to working how we did before, even in usual clinics, because we are all discovering that telephone consultations can work." But not just telemedicine. Also, there was, before the pandemic, a different group of research that were exploring the use of sensors to measure the functional activity and also to use to collect the vital signs and remotely transfer to a portal in order that the physicians can remotely follow these vital signs to the patients. So one of the lessons learned that we took from the pandemic, and this has been really clear reflected in these three publications that I have incorporated here for three different groups. One is for our group in collaborations with key opinion leaders from different hospitals in Europe, that was published in the GCO in Global Oncology in 2020. One is for the group of Flaherty that was published in Cancer Discovery in 2021, and the last one is from the group of the FDA. These three papers have the same conclusion. There is no doubt that we need to incorporate flexibility to clinical trials. We need to modernize clinical trials in order to move from the site-centric approach to the patient-centric approach. But however, for doing this modernization, we need to have funding, we need to be supported for or by adequate infrastructure, and we need to carefully coordinate all the global stakeholders collaboration. So with that, we did a survey and we distribute this to patients and oncologists, and we published the results of this survey last year in Digital Health. And I'm going to show you the key response that we get for the oncologists and patients, and that are complemented with your response. The oncologist survey was distributed among 88 physicians in US, of which 82 were qualified because they reside in US and were board certified medical oncologists, but just 75 response. And as you can see in the first response, they still the clinical trial participation is low, as I showed you in the first slides. 56% of the oncologists respond that less than 25% of the patients are eligible to participate in clinical trial, and 79% respond that less than 25% of the patients are referred to clinical trial. However, a higher proportion consider that if we improve the access to clinical trials, and we implement solutions that will be more attractive to the patients to participate in a study. In regards to the question how familiar they were with DCT solutions, just 44% at that time were familiar, and 35% of just 46 that respond to these questions work in clinical trials with DCT solutions. So more or less in line what you have responded. And this survey was distributed during the pandemic. It was distributed between the 20th of October and the 28th of October. So still there was not really high knowledge about this solution, and the physicians were not work too much in these solutions. However, they considered that these solutions were really attractive and an optimal solution for oncology patients to engage them to participate in clinical trial. 67% of the physicians consider that DCT is a good option, and 64% of the physicians will recommend a patient to a clinical trial with the centralized clinical solution. And also it's important to mention that 56% of the physicians consider that DCT may have an impact in positive in order to increase the retention of the patient in clinical trials and reduce the dropout. However, the physicians were not really familiar with these solutions. Around 50% of these investigators consider that they have some concerns about not feeling comfortable with decreased oversight using this DCT element. Moving to the patients survive, and this was submitted as well during the pandemic, but it was in between 12 and the 18th of February 2021. It was submitted to US and UK patients. The survival was distributed to 705 patients. However, just 300 were qualified because they received in the US and UK. They have diagnosis with cancer and they were 18 years older. Again, just 61% of the patients never participate in a clinical trial, so saying low clinical trial participation, but a higher proportion, 71%, were willing to participate in a clinical trial. But they expressed three main concerns. One, it was the adverse events that this new drug can have if they received placebo, in case this clinical trial is a randomized clinical trial with one of the arms is placebo, and the distance to the hospital. So that's something that obviously these DCT solutions can provide some help to reduce this concern from the patients. In regards how familiar were the patients to the new technology, obviously this is this survey was in US and UK, so the majority of the patients were really familiar and comfortable using new technology, these new technologies, having broadband, internet, Wi-Fi, or even have their own smartphone. And it was really interesting as well to see that the majority of the patients expressed they conform in replacing trial site visit with DCT solution. So in conclusion, these present surveys reveals the willingness of the different stakeholders to move from site-centric to patient-centric in order to facilitate enrollment, reduce patient burden, increase retention, increase diversity, improve quality of life, and expand real-world evidence. And obviously, in order to reduce the time frame of the drug development and bring medicines to the patients in a faster way. But as Clare has mentioned, still efforts remain to be done in terms of commitment to change, investments in infrastructure and technology, have a proper education of all the stakeholders, and provide the corresponding training and understand the legal and regulatory barriers that this new technology is bringing. And with that, I pass now to Amini that will touch bases on the imaging activities.
Thank you, Begoña. Now moving on to Median's insights as imaging CRO regarding decentralized clinical trials. During this presentation, I will go over three main topics. One, Median's experience with DCT during the pandemic, what changed, and our global impact analysis. Two, what were the mitigations we implemented with tooling updates based on the clinical impact assessment. Three, what would be Median's recommendations moving forward? The global pandemic put DCT activities front and center with a major switch from site-centric activities to patient-centric activities. Our imaging CRO was to adapt to this switch and support patient-centric upgrades. Median customized its services to adapt and support DCT and identified prompt and efficient mitigations. Our reporting metrics are customized to allow easier reporting and follow-up for all activities related to imaging, whether it may be site activities and responsiveness, electronic transfer and image reception, or queries management. The design of our independent review model, as well as performance monitoring, is already applicable to virtual models. Workflows put in place for expedited feedback to sites and sponsor for response confirmation or eligibility criteria, for example, are suitable to both site-centric and hybrid modes. Median is ready to support site-centric, hybrid virtual modes, as well as the new upgrades towards patient-centric services. Here, you can see the activities we identified as mostly impacted during the pandemic due to the site-centric workflow. Patients could not travel to undergo on-site visits and were lost to follow-up. As imaging CRO, we noticed a significant increase in the number of stakeholders providing data to us. Also, due to relocation of patient imaging acquisitions, the increase in image data loss was important. The images were not archived, not sent, not produced, or not suitable for central review. Globally, the increase of scheduled deviation spread. The multiplication of stakeholders in charge of image acquisition, mostly off-site, led to lower standards in image quality. Without guidelines, the number of occurrences was higher, where patient health information was embedded in the images that were uploaded to us. We needed to find quick, efficient, applicable, and practical mitigations with the sudden switch to DCT. You can see here what we did to support site activities and site staff shortages. First, provide support to ensure better image quality from patient service centers, in addition to being in contact with investigator sites. 2, customize electronic transfer to include images acquired off-site, and this also applies to the new stakeholders who needed to be operational as promptly as possible. Third, we went a step further and included flexibility in allowing image transfer from decentralized sites via cloud usage. And fourth, we tried to reduce site burden by updating the queries management workflow and allowing more time for response. Our goal was to react fast and increase proactive actions for sponsors, sites, and patients. Regarding patient data, as imaging CRO, we took new clinical information into account, such as COVID-19 vaccination information, for example. We implemented new workflows to include all new data linked to imaging and made sure that all relevant data was distributed to our independent reviewers without delay. Regarding site data, online reporting was improved and externally accessible live to allow smooth access to information. For sites, they received additional reconciliation on missing images, as well as reporting on scheduled deviations identified. Technical analysis. In addition to the reporting on images not received, we added specific reporting on the impact of lower quality image acquisitions. The sudden switch to DCT activities was met by customized reporting on events. We were monitoring non-evaluable responses as well as non-evaluable patients. Following the lessons learned, What are Median's recommendations? For patient-centric activities, simplifying access to information is crucial. For this, we would recommend patient service centers more accessible to patients in order to reduce patient burden for image acquisition and simplify query management. We would also advise to simplify access to e-transfer and query management for site staff by simplifying training needs and training completion. Our live online reporting platform allows users to monitor image quality and image loss, support sponsor and CRO follow-up on patient enrollment metrics, support site management of patient health information, report on tumor assessment responses from central review, and proactively alert on impacts for statistical analysis from central results. We would recommend adjusting to DCT activities via upgraded protocols that include DCT workflows, additional risk analysis with prepared customized mitigation plans, and adding specific logistics matching DCT activities for data collection.
Okay, thank you, Begoña, Claire, and Emily. Now it's time to conclude this webinar. But before, just a quick note, you can submit your questions through the question pane. We will answer them in a few minutes during the question and answer session that follows this send-off slide. So the bottom line takeaway message is that the traditional DCT elements should be viewed as applications of the correct overall study strategy and taken into consideration during the protocol design phase. The modernization in clinical trial is a reality, but commitment to change, investment in resources and technology, education and training and coordination among all the stakeholders still is needed. Finally, supporting patient-centric activities with online live reporting for sponsors and CRA with customized monitoring of activities, tumor assessment response, and study metrics for better proactivity is really something required. Okay, so I will move forward with the question in a moment, just leaving time for everybody to submit their questions. Okay, so first question, how do you estimate the difference for patients in the time they will have facing the oncologist and specialist? Side question, do we expect a reduction of the face-to-face and human exchanges? Is any of our panelists you can take that one?
Yeah, I can take it. I can take this question. Well, obviously, there is no doubt that if we reduce site visits, we are going to reduce the face-to-face interactions. However, one of the main concerns for the patients and one of the bottlenecks to participate in clinical trials is the distance to the hospital, and also they express concerns about to visit the site, the quality of light. So as these studies will not be potentially fully decentralized, the patient still continue to have contact with the site. And also the patient needs to understand that although remotely, the patient will continue to be properly followed for the overview of the safety or any necessity that the patient faces. So there needs to be a balance in between the visit to the site and also what activities will be can do remotely, and need to understand as well what will be the desires of the patient, and even with patients will be better suited for this kind of implementations, because not potentially all patients will be suitable, but obviously basis on your response, basis as well of the survival that we submit, I think there will be a really attractiveness for the patients to be able to reduce the visits to the hospital, and even more when there are clinical trials that has extensive requirement to attend the site visits, and this can be reduced with home health or with another platform or with telemedicine, as you are really familiar with that, in order to reduce the patient burden, reduce caregiver burden, and continue to maintain the quality of life.
Okay, thank you, Begoña.
And if I can add as well.
Sure.
Sorry, sir. Yeah, I think what Begoña was saying is really critical. I think the other thing is to always think when we're starting study design and the schedule of assessment is looking at the patient-centered approach. The physician and the patient has to be comfortable with the strategy that's being put in place, and that's what we were talking to earlier about designing studies that are patient-centric, so that both the patient is happy with the level of care they're receiving and the physician is also comfortable with what's being happened. And that's how we want to design flexible studies that are on that spectrum to allow the different decentralized elements to be incorporated into the protocol design and strategy overall.
Excellent. There is another question that we received. What changes have you seen in patient participation and retention of patient in trials utilizing DCT approaches? So I guess to summarize, it would be, do we have some comparative numbers between those two, the DCT versus non-DCT?
Yes. We do have data out there. There's a lot in the industry at the moment that has been published. I do feel, from a personal point of view, that there is some more time that needs to be done post-pandemic to get a proper sample size to see the longer-term benefits of recruitment and retention. I think depending on the therapeutic areas that we're working on, oncology is a really good one, for example, that we are seeing increased recruitment and retention for. But I do think as we go throughout 2023 and 2024, and the processes really embed and the sites and the patients become more comfortable, I think that's when we'll see a lot more meaningful data about how DCT elements actually increase the recruitment and retention.
Excellent, thank you, Claire. There is another question about the patient-centered images. So it's not exactly clear to me, what is a patient-centered image? I think the question is about the difference that you will get in the different centers that can be involved into producing the images for the patients.
Do you want me to take this one?
Yeah, please. Thank you, Emily.
Sure. Basically, what we refer to when we talk about patient service centers for imaging is when a patient doesn't have to travel to the investigator site and can have the images acquired in a hospital close by to reduce patient burden and still have a scheduling of events and a tumor assessment performed without the burden of traveling to the investigator site, which can be far from their home.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Just checking, last quick check that I did not miss any question. Yeah, I think we are done with the question and we are reaching the end of the webinar. So I would like to thank everybody for their attendance and great question. Due to time limitation, obviously, we might not be able to answer all of them during the live webinar, but no worries, we will be able to answer them by email. Do not hesitate to continue sending those questions. You can also do so by sending your questions to info-request@mediantechnologies.com. The replays of today's webinar will be accessible via Median's website and our LinkedIn and Twitter pages. So thank you, everybody, and have a very, very good day. Thank you to our panelists as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.